and welcome to Media7. I'm Jose Barbosa, filling in for Russell Brown, who has a touch of the palsy. On this week's show, we'll be looking at the opinion poll set to fill our media during this year's election. Can they really be trusted to give us an accurate picture of the nation's preferences? But first, here's me with something. This is the formal opening of the marae at Nuhaka in the Northern Hawke's Bay. Huia was in her late teens at the time. Decades later, she's been able to see the footage of that day.
I missed the opening because I had come home to my sick mother, but I had to go back to college, and while everybody was coming to this great opening.
And if that footage didn't exist, you wouldn't have seen the opening.
That's right, and I've seen it online through the archives.
But what are archives, and what do they do exactly?
I see it as an institution that has like 4 roles. Number 1 would be collecting the material, preserving it, providing the public access to it, providing it for people to reuse. So for people like me to be able to take it and put it in a documentary.
This program makes ample use of the Television New Zealand archives based in Wellington.
We record all programs that are broadcast on TVNZ that are of a local origin. So the tapes arrive here, and then we start doing things to them.
That was made in 1996. It's a bit snazzier looking now, but the archive runs pretty much the same way. In conjunction with News Video Research, which supplies the newsroom with more recent footage, it acts as a production library. The other main resource for footage is the New Zealand Film Archive. It's a repository for celluloid memories and is run by a private trust. Its stated goals are to collect, protect and connect New Zealanders with their filmed heritage. Without these resources, some programs and documentaries just couldn't be made. But it's not always easy to get your hands on the footage you need.
And though the footage might exist at, say, the New Zealand Film Archive, they actually physically have it, but they can't give me clearance for it. There have been cases when, despite years of faxes, letters, emails, phone calls, I still have not been able to identify who shot the footage, who owns the footage, and who I need to go to get copyright clearance from it.
Recently, the government announced it was investigating a plan to consolidate the Television New Zealand and Radio New Zealand archives under one roof, the Film Archives. That raised a few eyebrows.
If I had the reassurance that it was going to operate very much like the New Zealand Television Archive operates currently, I'd be very happy. If it was going to operate under the guidelines and regulations of the New Zealand Film Archive, I might not be quite so happy, because I find those guidelines and their operations have been in the past more of a hindrance to program makers.
So now there's real discussion over who will end up being the guardians of our audio and visual treasures. Whoever it is needs to balance the ideals of protection and restoration with that of public access.
They're preserved for all time, and you'll always be able to remember those days.
The possibility that the film archives could become solely responsible for a fair whack of our audio-visual taonga has been described as something of a shotgun wedding. To discuss the implications for the production industry are 3 possible bridesmaids of such a marriage. David Baldock of Baldock Productions, Leanne Pooley of Specific Films, and Dave Gibson of the Gibson Group. Welcome to the show, everybody. David, what is so questionable about the possibility that the film archives might become gatekeepers to those combined libraries?
Film Archive is predominantly about finding and preserving our historical heritage. The Television Archive is more of a production library, so its function is to be able to collect the television material that's brought in and to be able to exploit it for its best commercial gains and ends, and that might be selling it to or making it accessible to us as documentary makers or to the commercial production industry. It's got a different approach and mandate in terms of how it's using the material that it's got.
Leanne, what are your concerns here?
I think that an archive is more than the material that's in the archive. It's also the expertise of the people who take care of that archive. And for example, the television archive, I can bring up the wonderful Dolores and say to her, Dolores, I need a shot of a frog serenading a goat, and she will know where that is, you know, and that's invaluable. And you worry that if you amalgamate these organisations, you'll lose the people whose expertise give you access to the material, because there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of material which we don't have time as filmmakers to hunt through. We rely on the expertise of those people. And so you have to be careful that you don't see an archive as just the repository of that material. It is also the repository of the knowledge that comes alongside it.
Dave, where do you stand on all this?
It would seem like a marriage that just doesn't make any sense, and they're not natural bedfellows particularly, and you've pretty much said it, you know, one is an archive and the other is a production library. Ironically, I suspect the production library is pretty good at archiving, as far as I can tell. Although its history is more recent, it doesn't go right back, you know, before the beginning of television. And I think the film archive is kind of stuck somewhere in that age of preservation, and you can see that happening with something like NZ On Screen, which is neither of these organisations, and strangely not mentioned in this, but has become a kind of a sort of fits between the two. So you've got a bunch of people who've gone out, found a whole lot of really good television, and are putting it up online for people to enjoy. And I mean, you know, probably that's what the archive should have been doing.
But what I'm hearing is that you know, when you go to the film archive to try and get some footage, it seems to be extraordinarily difficult to do so. Is that right? How so?
And they all nodded. No, it's not. Yeah.
I mean, I think the devil is completely in the detail. That, you know, and before this happened, I would hope that anybody who pursues it would have a look at some of the other archives around the world that manage to negotiate preservation versus production.
Wouldn't you have a problem straight away? Because for TVNZ, it's just like a working production library day after day. There are people just in and out of it all the time. It's quite a different animal.
I agree that it's a different animal, but I don't think that, you know, I'm not against the notion of amalgamation if it's run in a way that makes it easy for me as a filmmaker to access the material. You're kind of assuming that it'll become more difficult. I don't know, are you assuming that?
Well, I think you've got three totally different
you have to rewrite
forms
the books.
of operation.
You have to set up a new organisation with a mandate.
And the biggest danger is that it is just a closed shop mentality rather than opening it up. And as filmmakers, we want our material to have access to the public, not to be taken and put away and not have any access at all. There are a lot of my colleagues that say, if I want to really preserve something and make sure that it doesn't see the light of day, put it into the film archive. And I don't think as our cultural history, that's a good approach. I think it's fantastic and it's important that the archive, our historical films, are preserved. I mean, I'm horrified when I hear there are no prints of the films of the 70s. You know, Goodbye Pork Pie was kind of almost lost. So there has to be that support going in there to make sure that material is archived properly.
But there's no point in preserving something if it's going to go into a box and no one can ever see it either. I mean, I have had experiences where I've gone, I'd like to have a look at this material, and they've gone, oh no, we can't put it into a steam deck, into the film editing machine, because it might fall apart. But I'm thinking, well, but what's the point of keeping it in the box if no one can ever look at it again? What is that box other than a box then? So
yeah, it has been noted, and I think it's true that the film archive has been extraordinarily good, and this is an issue that you raised, has been extraordinarily good at letting the public come in and see what they've got. You can actually rock up to the film archive and you can watch something for free. And
you could be cynical and say that's kind of like that's a tip of the iceberg sort of PR exercise to some extent. You know, that's taking stuff that you know is okay, and that you take a little selection of it and you go, look, here we go, we've got some stuff and it's really lovely and this is what you're paying for. But the reality is on a working day, you know, there's more under this. It's like an iceberg. There's a hell of a lot more rotting under the water, you know, than what we're all seeing up on top, you know, with the binoculars on a nice boat. So, you know, I think that's an issue. And I mean, we've made an assumption here that one is very good as a production library and the other is really good as an archive. I suspect the truth is that the archive is struggling as well to actually even archive all this stuff. And probably a lot of this is driven by money because they just don't have enough money to, you know, to do this.
David, one of the issues that's cropped up about finding archival footage and using it is the fact that the original rights owners may want to charge a premium for that usage. I would suspect that in the Film Archive's defence, they might say that, you know, if the owner of a particular piece of footage wants to charge whatever the heck they want for it, that's their right. It sucks, but there it is. I mean, what's your response to that?
I haven't come across that. What I've come across within our productions is that both with the Film Archive and the Television Archive, it's really been just the mechanical costs in terms of domestically to be able to get, as long as you can get access to the footage, to be able to put it into your programs. Where you come across the problem is when we can exploit our programs internationally, and sometimes the charging it just makes it prohibitive to be able to sell our programs. I have had experiences with the Television Archive where they've been really realistic and they said, well, no, we're not going to charge you the kind of commercial rates. Let's sit down and see what kind of return you're getting to be able to get your show out into Discovery or whatever, and we'll take a reasonable percentage return on that. That's fantastic from a producer's perspective because it enables me to get the programs out into the international marketplace. But that doesn't necessarily happen with the other archive.
People hear, you know, television, films, rah, rah, they think money. What they don't understand is there really isn't a great deal of money for any of us. And if a piece of footage would help a film, a documentary or any kind of film, and we don't use it because it's been priced out of our ability to pay, it's lost. It's lost for, you know, the public doesn't see it, the international audience doesn't see it, it sits on the shelf, it's a wasted opportunity.
Dave,
can I just circle back on something, because I think that you've probably got to differentiate a little bit in terms of like how an archive charges or how people charge, because they can charge you a physical cost for the, and I understand that, you know, if they've got to go and they've got to get it and they've got to copy it, then that's a physical cost. But where you get caught is if there are royalty charges or actor charges or some charge that goes back to the person that originated the footage, then I think they just should get out of the way, because if we've got the energy and the time to go to the 3 actors or to go to the person who gave them the footage and do that, then we should be allowed to do that and just get in and do that. And in a way, really, it's just the whole question of ownership and royalty could be kind of got around, because most filmmakers are experienced at dealing with those sort of people and going to those people. And I mean, to me, you know, the way the archive should operate is probably just almost on a, well, we'll give it to you, we'll give you anything if you pay the technical cost and you can organise the clearance. And then it's our problem.
And the best person to argue the clearance of something is the producer involved.
Yeah. And organisations like the Library of Congress in America operate that way. You go to the Library of Congress, it's this extraordinarily incredible archive of American footage. You pay a research fee if you're asking somebody to do some research, which seems perfectly fair to me, and you pay the cost of getting that material transferred to whatever format it is you can use. You don't pay copyright. Copyright is a whole other thing, and it should have nothing to do with the archives, I don't think.
I mean, one of the arguments that's cropped up is that instead of handing everything over to the film archives, there should be a new government agency to deal with everything that we've just talked about. Is that a preferable situation?
I think an interesting question would be where TVNZ would fit into that, because I guess if as is possible, that TVNZ was sold, then I would kind of become slightly in favour of that, because it would be a pity if TVNZ was sold to say foreign ownership, and the TVNZ production library was part of that. That would make me a little bit nervous.
Which happened when Natural History New Zealand was sold. I mean, Natural History New Zealand held the 3rd biggest natural history library in the world, and when it was sold, it went to Rupert Murdoch. That was natural history material that was owned by New Zealand.
Having said that, there's an interesting conundrum in that, because that's a well-run organisation with a terrific system for doing it. You know, so Mr. Capitalist has come in there and running a really good system.
Yay, so, capitalism! You know, awesome.
It is, you know,
and
you know, you go down at the down to the Socialist Department in Taranaki Street, you know, and it's a little bit tougher, you know. So, you know,
I think we'll wrap on that. Thank you very much, guys. Coming up after the break, we'll be discussing if political opinion polls can really be trusted.